My uncle mocked me, plotted to get me fired, and nearly bankrupted a single mom. So I beat him at his own game and left him jobless, divorced, and publicly humiliated. When my uncle Bob lost his job, my first instinct was to help him. Not because I knew him well, I didn't, but because he was family, and growing up as an Armenian meant that I'd automatically go above and beyond for him. At the time, I worked at a pretty big finance company, so I tried to pull some strings and see if any of my buddies' companies were hiring. They weren't, but that's when my company had a rare job opening, stable salary, great benefits, even remote options. It was a hand-picked favor. I pulled some serious strings to get him an interview. That evening, as I drove over to his place, I was filled with excitement. I had this image of me putting a smile on his face, of us going to the gym after work together. But when I got there, before the words could even come out of my mouth, he started attacking me. "You're still a little desk monkey?" he remarked, grabbing the collar of my shirt. "You see, my mom, his sister, and he had a huge fallout a few years ago. I still don't know the details, but I knew it was the reason I hadn't visited him. Listen, I know you and my mom have been fighting, but that's now what I'm here for." He interrupted me with incoherent monkey sounds. I stared at him in disbelief, because I think he was trying to offend me, but all I saw was an unemployed man-child being an R-word. I placed my hand over his mouth and told him to shut the F up. This made him quiet long enough for me to propose the opportunity. When I told him about it, he laughed in my face. "Why would I want some little office job? I'm not that desperate." He said it like I was offering him scraps off my plate. It stung a little because I knew he was digging himself a deeper hole, but like J. Cole said, if he doesn't want to be saved, then I can't save him. And the next day at work, I was grateful for Bob being his man-child self, because I met a single mom called Lily, applying for an entry-level spot. Huge eye bags, slightly frizzy hair, pale, very exhausted. Lily had previously been juggling 2 jobs to keep her kid fed, because she was extremely academically qualified. She'd just never managed to land an internship. But otherwise, she was one of the most prepared candidates I'd ever seen. I pulled every string I had to get her into that higher-paying position. A month later, when I checked on Lily again, her smile was practically radiant. She beckoned me over to her desk, and sitting there was a framed photo of her son on a bike, his very first one. She told me they had managed to escape an unsafe situation, and when she was struggling so much, she always questioned whether she made the right decision to leave, but now she knows she did. I still keep the thank you card her son wrote me with a green crayon pinned to my desk, and I guess word spread around fast, because soon everyone in the office knew I was the one to hire Lily. One of the girls even posted a photo of her on their Instagram, captioned with how proud they were of her, and jokingly tagged me as a thanks for introducing them. I thought it was pretty funny, and ended up reposting it. This is when things began to take a turn, because Bob saw it, and suddenly, the story changed. My uncle started spam texting me. According to him, I must have misunderstood, because he never rejected the offer. He acted wounded, like I'd stolen his opportunity. Behind my back, he started telling everyone in the family that I betrayed him. At first, I brushed it off as dumb family gossip, until it got worse. HR called me into a meeting through an anonymous complaint. Apparently I was discriminatory, had favoritism, and sabotaged candidates who were more qualified. He made it look professional enough to trigger an internal review. I sat there while HR read the accusations out loud, feeling like the floor was splitting underneath me. Lily was temporarily laid off without pay, and I myself was also told to go home until further notice. It wasn't just petty anymore. It was a war, and Bob didn't see it at the time, but I was going to do anything to win. Not just for me, not just for Lily, but for the family too. I got home and threw my bag across the living room, watching it skid across the hardwood floor and slam against the wall. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my phone. I couldn't believe Bob had gone this far. Getting me temporarily suspended was one thing. I could handle his petty vendetta against me, but dragging Lily into this, a single mom with 2 kids and a mortgage, that crossed every line imaginable. I called Lily right away, pacing my small apartment as the phone rang. She answered on the first ring, her voice thick with tears. She told me she didn't know how she would make it through even a week without pay. Her savings were almost gone after Tommy's hospital stay last month, pneumonia that had scared all of us. I promised her I would fix this, though I had no idea how yet. The desperation in her voice made my blood boil even more. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment until nearly 3 in the morning, the floorboards creaking beneath my feet as I moved from the bedroom to the kitchen and back again. I thought about everything I knew about Bob. He was smart, but careless, organized, but sloppy when he got emotional, and most importantly, he kept records of everything, a habit from his military days that he often bragged about during company happy hours. The next morning, bleary-eyed but determined, I drove to the office before dawn. The parking lot was empty except for the security guard's car. I knew the guard, Dave, from company picnics, where he'd always complimented my potato salad. I told him I needed to grab some files for the investigation. He hesitated, his weathered face creasing with concern, but let me in when I mentioned it might help clear Lily's name. Sometimes being well-liked has its advantages. The office was empty and dark, the motion sensor lights flickering on as I made my way through the cubicles. I went straight to Bob's desk, a large corner workspace with family photos arranged precisely at right angles. His computer would be locked, but I wasn't interested in that, at least not yet. Bob was old school. He kept paper copies of everything in his filing cabinet, a massive metal thing that had been there since before I started. The top drawer was locked, but the bottom 2 weren't. I started digging through folders labeled with his meticulous handwriting. In the back of the bottom drawer, behind hanging files about budget reports, I found a folder labeled Personal. Inside were printouts of emails between Bob and the hiring manager from 3 months ago. The emails showed Bob had actually rejected 2 qualified candidates before Lily was hired. He had claimed they wouldn't be a good culture fit, despite their excellent qualifications. This directly contradicted his accusations that she was hired without proper vetting. My heart raced as I realized what I'd found. I took pictures of everything with my phone, making sure the lighting was good enough to read every damning word, but I needed more. I remembered Bob always bragged about his perfect memory and how he never needed to write down his password, but I also remembered catching him once writing something on a yellow sticky note and hiding it under his keyboard when he thought no one was looking. I lifted the keyboard, disturbing a small cloud of dust and crumbs. There it was, a sticky note with what looked like a password. Tommy 2 dogs, his grandson's name and his 2 Labradors, with an exclamation point. Typical. I tried it on his computer, holding my breath as I typed. It worked. shocked. I was in, staring at his desktop background of a fishing trip from last summer. His email was full of evidence. He had been planning this for weeks. There were drafts of the complaint letter, edited multiple times to sound more professional and less like the personal attack it clearly was. There were emails to his golf buddy and upper management, casually mentioning concerns about the hiring process months before filing the formal complaint. But the smoking gun was an email to his brother-in-law, Mark, who worked in HR. Need to get rid of that new girl and her friend? Can you make sure the complaint lands on the right desk? Mark's reply was short. I'll handle it. Dinner. Sunday. The timestamp showed this exchange happened 2 days before our suspension. I forwarded everything to my personal email, then carefully logged out and put everything back exactly as I found it. I left the office before anyone else arrived, nodding to Dave on my way out. That afternoon, I called our company's anonymous ethics hotline, my heart pounding as I waded through the automated system. I reported a conflict of interest in HR regarding my case. I didn't mention names, just said I had evidence that the complaint against me and Lily was orchestrated by someone with family connections in HR. 2 days later, I got a call from Barbara in senior HR. She wanted to meet. I brought copies of everything I had found, neatly organized in a folder. Barbara's face grew darker with each document I showed her, her lips pressing into a thin line. She told me she would handle it and asked me to keep this confidential. A week passed with no news. I called Lily daily, helping her figure out how to delay bill payments and apply for emergency assistance. Her voice got more desperate each day. She mentioned having to tell her kids they couldn't do their usual weekend activities. The older one, Emma, apparently understood too well for a 10-year-old. Then I got a call from Barbara. The investigation was stalled. Mark in HR was blocking it, claiming my evidence was obtained illegally. They couldn't use it. Bob would get away with it, and Lily and I would likely be formally terminated soon. I hung up and slammed my fist against the wall, leaving a small dent in the drywall. I needed a new plan. If I couldn't win through official channels, I'd have to find another way. I remembered that Bob's wife, Susan, worked at my sister's dental office. My sister had mentioned that Susan often complained about Bob's drinking problem during lunch breaks. I called my sister and carefully asked about Susan's schedule. She told me Susan worked late on Thursdays for the evening appointments. That Thursday, I went to Bob's favorite bar, a dimly lit place with sports memorabilia covering the walls. As expected, he was there alone, already 3 drinks in, watching a baseball game on the mounted TV. I sat a few stools away and ordered a beer. The bartender, Jamie, knew me from my softball league. We chatted loudly enough for Bob to hear about the unfair suspension I was dealing with. Bob couldn't help himself. He turned and started gloating, his face flushed from alcohol, saying I should have known better than to cross him. Jamie kept serving him drinks while I nursed my 1 beer. By his 6th drink, Bob was bragging openly about how he had fixed the situation with his brother-in-law's help. Family takes care of family, he slurred, tapping his glass for another refill. I had my phone recording in my pocket the whole time, capturing every incriminating word. The next day, I sent the recording to Barbara, along with a note explaining that this was obtained legally in a public place. I also mentioned that I had consulted an attorney about wrongful termination and defamation, which wasn't entirely true, but seemed like a good bluff. This time, things moved quickly. Barbara called me that afternoon. Both Lily and I were reinstated with back pay. Bob and Mark were placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. When I returned to work the following Monday, Bob's desk was empty, his family photos gone. Lily hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. She whispered thank you over and over, her eyes bright with relief. 2 weeks later, the company announced a restructuring. Bob's position was eliminated. Mark was transferred to a different department, away from HR. I was offered a promotion to fill part of Bob's former role, which I accepted after some consideration. The best part came a month later. Lily was promoted to team lead, with a substantial raise. Her performance had always been excellent, and with Bob gone, it was finally recognized. Bob tried to fight his termination, claiming age discrimination, but with the evidence of his misconduct so clear, his case went nowhere. I heard through office gossip that Susan left him soon after, tired of his drinking and the embarrassment of the whole situation. I didn't set out to ruin Bob's life. I just wanted justice for Lily and myself. But Bob had built his life on lies and manipulation, and when that foundation crumbled, everything fell with it. The last I heard, Bob was working at his brother's hardware store in another state. Sometimes I feel a twinge of guilt about how things turned out for him, but then I remember Lily's kids and how close they came to losing their home because of Bob's petty revenge. I still have the recordings and emails saved in a folder on my computer. I hope I never need them again, but I've learned it's better to be prepared. Bob taught me that much at least. Lily and I still have lunch together every week. Her kids are doing great in school now that she can afford after-school programs. She doesn't know all the details of what I did to save our jobs. Some things are better left unsaid. The family dinner tradition continues, though now it's at my place more often than not. Uncle Bob isn't mentioned anymore. Some relatives think I was too harsh, that family is family, but they weren't there when Lily was crying about possibly losing her house. They didn't see what I saw. I don't regret what I did, not for a second. Sometimes I wonder if karma is real. Uncle Bob's downfall came faster than I expected. Within weeks of him losing his job, his wife left him. She took their kids and moved in with her parents. I heard through the family grapevine that she'd been unhappy for years. Bob losing his job was just the final straw. I didn't plan for his marriage to fall apart. That wasn't part of my revenge, but I can't say I feel bad about it either. In fact, there are moments when I feel a certain satisfaction, knowing his comfortable life has completely unraveled. Last week, I ran into Bob at the grocery store. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing the same clothes I'd seen him in at the last family gathering months ago. His eyes were bloodshot, and he had that hollow look of someone who hasn't been sleeping well. He pretended not to see me, ducking into another aisle. That was fine by me. I had nothing to say to him anyway. What could I possibly say to the man I systematically destroyed? Lily got promoted last month. She's now managing the entire customer service department. Her boss recognized her hard work and dedication after Bob left. The irony isn't lost on me. Bob's absence created the very opportunity he tried to deny her. She invited me over to celebrate with a special dinner. She cooked her grandmother's lasagna recipe, the one she saves for truly special occasions. Her daughter made a handmade card thanking me for being the best friend ever. The card was decorated with glitter and stickers, with a carefully drawn picture of the 3 of us holding hands. I almost cried right there at the kitchen table. The truth is, I'm not the hero in this story. What I did to Bob was calculated and cold. I spent weeks gathering evidence of his misconduct at work, work. I created fake email accounts to send anonymous tips to HR. I even befriended his assistant to get inside information about his schedule and habits. I brought coffee to her desk 3 times a week, listening to her complaints about Bob's behavior, encouraging her to document everything. I manipulated people and situations to get what I wanted. I played the long game, and I played it well. Was it worth it? When I see Lily's daughter thriving in her new after-school science program, I think yes. When I watch her confidently explaining her volcano project, knowing that just months ago she was afraid to speak up in class, I feel vindicated. When I drive past Bob's empty house with the for sale sign in the yard, the once pristine lawn now overgrown with weeds, I feel a twinge of something. Not quite guilt, but not satisfaction either. It's more complicated than that. My sister called me yesterday. She wanted to know if I would help Bob find a new job. Apparently he's been staying on friends' couches, unable to afford an apartment. His unemployment benefits are running out. She told me he's been drinking too much, that his friends are getting tired of his presence. My sister thinks I have connections in the industry. Little does she know those connections were what I used to destroy him. The thought of using those same channels to help him feels like a cruel joke. I told her I'd think about it. That was a lie. I have no intention of helping Bob. Some people might call that heartless. Maybe it is, but every action has consequences. Bob chose to target a single mom struggling to support her child. He chose to abuse his power, to make jokes about her appearance in meetings, to schedule important presentations when he knew she had childcare issues. Now, he's living with the results. Lily doesn't suspect my involvement in Bob's downfall. She thinks it was just lucky timing that the company discovered his misconduct right when they were looking to make cuts. Sometimes she mentions how strange it was that so many complaints about him surfaced all at once. I just nod and change the subject, offering her more wine or asking about her daughter's latest school project. The company holiday party is next week. Lily asked me to be her +1. It will be interesting to walk through those office halls knowing what I engineered there. The HR director who received my anonymous tips might even be there. I wonder if she ever figured out that the evidence against Bob came from multiple fake sources. All me. I've already picked out my outfit, something understated but elegant. I want to blend in, to be forgettable to anyone who might have received my anonymous emails. My methods weren't exactly ethical. I created fake social media accounts to befriend Bob's coworkers. I spent hours in coffee shops near his office, accidentally bumping into people who worked with him. I listened to their complaints and encouraged them to report him. I may have exaggerated some details when passing information along. I definitely timed everything for maximum impact. I made sure the final evidence landed on HR's desk the day before the quarterly budget review. The IT guy who helped me access some of Bob's emails doesn't know my real name. I paid him in cash after meeting him through a friend of a friend. That part still makes me nervous sometimes. If anyone ever investigated thoroughly, that could be traced back to me. I still have nightmares about police officers showing up at my door, evidence of computer fraud in their hands. I wake up sweating, heart pounding, before realizing it was just a dream, but no one is investigating. Bob went down without much of a fight. He was too embarrassed by the evidence against him. The company was happy to let him resign quietly rather than fire him publicly. They didn't want the bad publicity either. The whole thing was wrapped up neatly, with minimal fuss, exactly as I had planned. My parents called last night. They're hosting Thanksgiving this year and wanted to know if I thought inviting Bob would be too awkward. I told them it was their house, their decision. Mom sighed and said, family should stick together during hard times. I bit my tongue to keep from pointing out that Bob didn't seem concerned about family when he was trying to get Lily fired. Dad mentioned that Bob's son might not come home from college if his father isn't welcome. The guilt trip was subtle but effective. Classic mom and dad. Sometimes at night, I replay everything in my head. Could I have found another way? Maybe I could have just threatened Bob, told him I knew what he was doing and demanded he back off. But I didn't trust him to keep his word. Men like Bob don't change their ways because someone asks nicely. They understand only one language, consequences. And I made sure the consequences were severe. I've started volunteering at a local legal aid clinic that helps people facing workplace discrimination. I don't have a law degree, but I help with paperwork and scheduling. It feels good to help people through proper channels. Maybe it's my way of balancing the scales for what I did. Or maybe it's just another form of atonement for crossing lines I never thought I would cross. Lily's daughter is in the school play next month. She has a speaking part, just 3 lines, but she's practicing constantly. Lily says she's never seen her so confident. The after-school drama program has really brought her out of her shell. None of that would have been possible if Lily had lost her job. When I watch her rehearse her lines, stumbling occasionally but never giving up, I remind myself why I did what I did. I got a text from Bob's oldest son yesterday. He's in college now, and he asked if we could meet for coffee. I'm not sure what he wants to talk about. Maybe he suspects something. Maybe he just needs someone to talk to about his parents' divorce. I agreed to meet him next week. I'm nervous about it. What will I say if he asks me directly? Can I lie to his face? His message seemed casual enough, but there was something in the wording that made me uneasy. The family dynamics have shifted since everything happened. Some relatives have taken Bob's side, others Lily's. Holiday gatherings are more tense now. People are careful about what they say around me, like they sense I was involved somehow. No one has accused me directly, but I catch looks sometimes. My cousin Maria watched me carefully at the last family dinner, her eyes narrowing when Bob's name came up. I wonder what she knows, or what she thinks she knows. Would I do it all again? In a heartbeat. Some people might not understand that. They might think revenge is never the answer, but they weren't there. They didn't see what I saw. They didn't feel what I felt. They didn't watch Lily come back from lunch breaks with red eyes, trying to hide that she'd been crying in her car. I don't regret what I did, not for a second. And if protecting someone like Lily means crossing lines and breaking rules, then I'll cross those lines again if I have to. Because sometimes justice doesn't come unless you make it happen yourself. I knew I had to be smart about this. Uncle Richard wasn't just Lily's boss. He was my dad's older brother and a partner at the accounting firm where Lily worked. He had connections, money, and the kind of reputation that made people listen when he spoke. I had none of those things, just a burning anger and a promise I'd made to myself the moment Lily called me in tears, her voice breaking as she explained how Richard had humiliated her in front of the entire office before firing her. The day after Lily was fired, I visited her apartment. Her eyes were puffy from crying, and her 5-year-old daughter Emma was coloring quietly in the corner, her small face unusually solemn, as if she could sense her mother's distress. Lily tried to put on a brave face, telling me she'd find another job soon, but I could see the stack of bills on her kitchen counter and the calendar calendar with circled due dates. She had maybe 2 weeks before things got really bad. The red circles on her calendar seemed to pulse with urgency, a countdown to disaster. I didn't tell her what I was planning. Instead, I asked questions about the accounting firm, about Uncle Richard's habits, about the other partners. I made it seem like casual conversation, just a friend checking in. Lily answered everything, not realizing she was giving me ammunition. She described Richard's corner office with its pretentious golf trophies, the way he always kept his blinds half closed, and how he insisted on keeping certain client records in handwritten form. That night, I created a new email address using a fake name. I spent hours drafting a message to the 3 other partners at the firm, carefully wording my concerns about potential irregularities I'd noticed in some client accounts that Richard handled. I didn't make direct accusations, just raised questions that would make them look closer at his work. I read and rewrote that email 7 times before hitting send, my heart pounding as I watched it disappear into cyberspace. The next day, I visited my cousin Thomas, who worked in IT at the firm. We weren't close, but I brought him lunch and casually mentioned I was thinking about accounting as a career. Could he show me around sometime when the office was quiet? Thomas was flattered by my interest. He agreed to let me visit that weekend when he was doing system updates, and most people would be gone. As I left, he mentioned how the partners were already on edge about something, exchanging tense whispers in the conference room. My anonymous email had hit its mark. Saturday came, and Thomas gave me a tour of the empty office. The place felt different without people, both smaller and more imposing with its polished surfaces and silent corridors. When he stepped away to restart some servers, I slipped into Uncle Richard's office. The smell of his expensive cologne still hung in the air. I knew exactly what I was looking for. Lily had mentioned Richard kept handwritten notes about client billing in his desk drawer because he was old school about some things. I found the notebook and took pictures of several pages with my phone, my fingers trembling slightly as I flipped through the pages. I didn't understand all the accounting terms, but I didn't need to. I just needed to find patterns that looked suspicious, and I did. There were clients being billed for hours that didn't match the computer records Lily had described to me. Small discrepancies, but they added up. Some entries had been crossed out and rewritten with higher numbers. Others had margin notes about additional services that seemed vague and convenient. On Monday, I sent another anonymous email to the partners with my concerns about billing practices, attaching a few of the photos as evidence. I suggested they might want to audit Richard's client accounts before it became a bigger problem. I worded it carefully, like a concerned employee who feared retaliation, someone who had noticed irregularities but was afraid to come forward openly. 2 days later, Dad mentioned at dinner that Uncle Richard was in hot water at work. There was going to be an internal audit of his accounts. Richard had blamed a former employee for the mistakes, Lily, but the partners weren't buying it since the handwriting in the notes was clearly his. Dad pushed his food around his plate as he spoke, his forehead creased with worry for his brother. I kept my face neutral, but inside I was celebrating. The first part of my plan was working, but I needed more. Getting Richard in trouble at work wasn't enough. I wanted Lily to get her job back. I wanted her to have the security she deserved, and for Emma to have a mother who wasn't constantly afraid of the future. The next phase of my plan involved Richard's wife, Aunt Karen. She ran a popular Instagram account showcasing their perfect family life and luxury vacations. Her feed was a carefully curated display of wealth and happiness, designer clothes, exotic destinations, and elaborate home decor. What most people didn't know was that Uncle Richard had a gambling problem. He'd managed to hide it from everyone except Lily, who had accidentally seen some concerning bank statements while filing paperwork. I created a fake Instagram account and started following Aunt Karen. I studied her posts, noting when she was most active and who her closest friends were. I learned her habits, how she posted every morning after her workout, and again in the evening to showcase whatever expensive restaurant they were dining at. Then I sent her a direct message from another fake account, posing as someone who had seen Richard at a casino the previous weekend. I mentioned a specific amount of money he'd lost, a number I'd completely made up, but one large enough to cause concern without seeming implausible. Aunt Karen blocked the account immediately, but the seed was planted. That Sunday at family dinner, I noticed the tension between them. Richard kept checking his phone nervously, and Karen barely spoke to him. She flinched when he reached for her hand across the table. Their usual synchronized performance of marital bliss had faltered, revealing the cracks beneath. Meanwhile, the audit at the firm was not going well for Richard. Dad mentioned that one of the partners had called him, asking questions about Richard's gambling habits. Apparently, some clients had complained about billing issues, and the firm was taking it seriously. Dad looked older suddenly, the lines around his eyes deeper as he confided his worries to Mom when they thought I couldn't hear. I sent one final anonymous email to the partners, suggesting they talk to Lily about what she knew. I mentioned she had been fired shortly after accidentally seeing some concerning financial documents. I included her phone number and suggested they might want to offer her protection from retaliation if she spoke with them. I emphasized that Lily was a single mother who had been unfairly terminated and might have valuable information. 3 weeks after Lily was fired, she called me, her voice excited. The firm had contacted her for an interview. They wanted to hear her side of the story about the billing irregularities. She didn't know how they got her number or why they were suddenly interested, but she was hopeful it might lead to something. I could hear Emma chattering happily in the background, picking up on her mother's improved mood. The meeting went even better than I'd hoped. Lily told me afterward that the partners had apologized for her termination. They offered her job back with a raise and a different supervisor. Richard was being placed on leave pending a full investigation. She described how the senior partner had personally walked her through the office, introducing her to everyone as a valued team member who was rejoining them. At the next family dinner, Uncle Richard didn't show up. Aunt Karen came alone, tight-lipped and refusing to discuss his absence. Her Instagram had been silent for days. No perfect family photos, no luxury lifestyle updates. Dad looked worried and kept trying to call him between courses, stepping outside to leave voicemails that went unanswered. I learned from Dad's conversation with Mom later that night that Richard had been asked to take a leave of absence from the firm. The audit had uncovered serious problems with his client billing. Some money was missing, and there was talk about involving the police. Worse, Karen had found gambling receipts in his car and had kicked him out of the house. She'd discovered he'd remortgaged their home without telling her to cover his debts. I should have felt satisfied, but watching my dad's distress made me uncomfortable. He kept saying he couldn't believe his brother would do something like this. He wondered if there had been a mistake, if someone had had set Richard up. His voice cracked as he spoke about the brother he'd always looked up to, now revealed as someone he didn't recognize. For a moment, guilt washed over me. I hadn't expected things to unravel so completely. I hadn't planted any false evidence. Everything the firm found was real, but I had deliberately set the wheels in motion. I had orchestrated Richard's downfall with careful precision. Was I any better than him, manipulating people and situations to get what I wanted? But then I remembered Lily's face the day she was fired. I remembered Emma asking why her mom was crying. I remembered the stack of bills and the circled due dates on the calendar. I remembered how Richard had laughed at the office holiday party about how easily he could replace any of his staff if they didn't meet his standards. The next day, I visited Lily at her apartment. She was getting ready for her first day back at work, her outfit carefully pressed, her confidence visibly restored. Emma was excited because after-school care was back on the table. The little girl twirled around the living room, showing me how she would dance in her upcoming recital, something that might have been impossible without Lily's income. Lily hugged me and said she didn't know how the partners had figured out the truth, but she was grateful they had. I smiled and told her sometimes justice finds a way. As I left her apartment, I deleted all the fake email accounts from my phone. I erased the trail of what I'd done, but I kept the satisfaction of knowing I'd made things right. Uncle Richard made his own choices. He chose to mistreat Lily. He chose to manipulate billing records. He chose to gamble away money that wasn't his. I just made sure he couldn't hide those choices anymore. Some might call what I did wrong, but watching Lily walk confidently back into that office with her head held high, that felt right. And if protecting someone means making sure the truth comes to light, then I'll do it again if I have to. Because sometimes the system works, but only if someone gives it a push in the right direction. I've been watching Uncle Roger closely since then. It's been 3 weeks since Lily got her job back, and his life has been falling apart piece by piece. Not because I'm still actively trying to ruin it, but because his own actions finally caught up with him. The satisfaction I thought I'd feel has been replaced by something more complicated, a mixture of vindication and unexpected emptiness. The day after Lily returned to work, Roger was called into a meeting with the company's legal team. They didn't just fire him, they made it clear they would be pursuing legal action for the billing fraud. I heard through Lily that they found even more discrepancies once they started digging deeper. Turns out my uncle had been skimming money for years, not just months. The amounts they discovered were staggering, nearly 6 figures over the past 3 years alone. Each fraudulent entry in the books represented another family like Lily's that could have been harmed by his selfishness. I ran into Aunt Patty at the grocery store last week. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes, and her normally perfect hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. The designer clothes and manicured nails that had been her trademark were noticeably absent. She told me Roger had moved out and was staying at a motel on the edge of town, the kind with peeling paint and weekly rates. The gambling debts were worse than anyone knew. They might lose the house, the beautiful colonial with the wraparound porch where we'd had countless family barbecues and holiday gatherings. Part of me felt bad for her, but she had ignored his behavior for years, turning a blind eye to his late nights and suspicious phone calls. Still, I slipped her my number and told her to call if she needed anything. The look of gratitude in her eyes made me wonder if she'd been more victim than accomplice. Roger tried calling me twice, but I didn't pick up. The voicemail started with him yelling, calling me a traitor to the family. His voice was slurred in that first message, the words punctuated by the distinctive clink of ice against glass. By the second message, his tone had changed. He sounded defeated, asking if I could talk to Lily about dropping the charges. The anger was gone, replaced by a desperation that made me uncomfortable. I deleted both without responding, though my finger hovered over the save button longer than I'd like to admit. Mom's been caught in the middle of all this. She came over to my apartment last night, bringing lasagna as a peace offering. The rich smell of tomato sauce and cheese filled my small living room as we sat at my kitchen table while she tried to convince me to help Roger. She said family should stick together, that everyone makes mistakes. Her hands trembled slightly as she served the food, her wedding ring catching the light, a reminder of her 30 years married to Dad, Roger's brother. I reminded her that Roger didn't just make a mistake. He deliberately hurt Lily and her kids. The lasagna grew cold between us as we argued. Mom left without finishing her dinner, her shoulders slumped in a way that made her look suddenly older. I've been spending more time with Lily and her children. Her son Tyler is teaching me to play chess, his small face scrunched in concentration as he explains the complex strategies his father taught him before he passed away. I'm helping her daughter Emma with math homework, watching her confidence grow with each problem she solves correctly. Their apartment feels warm and happy now, filled with laughter and the smell of home-cooked meals. The stress lines around Lily's eyes have faded. She's even talking about going back to school part-time to finish her accounting degree. Sometimes I catch her looking at her children with such fierce pride, it makes my throat tight. Yesterday, I got a letter from Roger's lawyer asking me to meet them at their office. The heavy cream envelope with its embossed letterhead seemed designed to intimidate. I almost threw it away, but curiosity got the better of me. I went this morning, half expecting threats or demands. The office was all polished wood and leather chairs, smelling faintly of expensive cologne. Instead of the confrontation I anticipated, I found Roger sitting there looking 10 years older, with his lawyer explaining that he wanted to make a full confession about everything he'd done at the company. The lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman in a tailored suit, explained that Roger was hoping for leniency if he cooperated completely. He'd already provided documentation of all his fraudulent activities and was prepared to pay back what he could. The gambling addiction had been going on for years, destroying his judgment and his ethics. He'd started therapy and joined a support group. As she spoke, I studied Roger's hands. They were constantly in motion, fidgeting with his watch, his tie, the edge of his jacket. I sat there silently, watching my uncle stare at the floor. The powerful man who had terrorized Lily, who had always acted like he owned the world, now couldn't even meet my eyes. His expensive suit hung loosely on his frame, as if he'd lost weight rapidly. The lawyer asked if I would consider speaking to Lily about not pushing for the harshest penalties. I told them I'd pass along the information, but the decision was entirely hers. Roger flinched at that, perhaps realizing how completely he'd lost control of the situation. When I left the office, I felt strangely empty. The satisfaction I'd expected to feel seeing Roger brought low wasn't there. Instead, I just felt tired of the whole situation. The bright afternoon sunlight seemed harsh after the dim office lighting. I called Lily and gave her the update without adding my opinion. She listened quietly and thanked me for letting her know. That evening, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. It was Roger's boss, Mr. Daniels. He wanted to thank me for bringing the fraud to light. The company had been losing money for years without understanding why. His voice was warm with gratitude as he explained how my actions had potentially saved several jobs. He also mentioned they were creating a new position in the accounting department and thought Lily would be perfect for it. A promotion with better pay and flexible hours so she could take classes. I hung up feeling like maybe some good had come from all this after all. Not just justice for Lily, but a chance for her to build something better for herself and her kids. The family fallout continues though. My cousin Taylor, Roger's daughter, sent me a long text message today saying I had destroyed their family. She blamed me for her mom's depression and her dad's legal troubles. The words were harsh, punctuated with angry emojis and accusations that cut deeper than I wanted to admit. I started typing a dozen different responses but deleted them all. There was nothing I could say that would make her understand right now. This morning, I ran into Lily at the coffee shop near her office. She was wearing a new blazer and looked confident as she ordered her drink. We sat together for a few minutes before she headed to work. She told me she'd decided not to push for the harshest penalties against Roger, not because she forgave him, but because spending her energy on revenge wouldn't help her move forward. She was focused on her promotion and her classes now. I walked home thinking about choices and consequences. Roger made his choices. I made mine when I decided to expose him. Lily made hers by choosing to move forward rather than looking back. None of us can escape the ripple effects of what we've done. The family Christmas party is next month, and I'm not sure if I'll go. Mom keeps saying that healing can only start when we're all together, but I'm not convinced. Some breaks might be permanent, and I'm okay with that. I don't regret what I did. Last night, I drove past the motel where Roger's staying. His car was parked outside a ground floor room, the light glowing behind thin curtains. I sat there for a few minutes, wondering what he was doing, if he was placing bets on his phone or actually trying to get better. Then I drove away. His story isn't mine to worry about anymore. Lily texted me this morning with a picture of her kids decorating their apartment for the holidays. They looked happy, their faces flushed with excitement as they hung colorful lights around their small living room. She included a message thanking me again for helping her when no one else would. That picture is worth more than any family relationship I might have lost. I don't know what happens next. Roger might rebuild his life, or he might not. My relationship with that side of the family might heal, or it might stay broken. Lily might become the successful accountant she always wanted to be, or life might throw her new challenges. What I do know is that standing up for what's right comes with a price, but watching someone who deserves a chance actually get that chance, that's worth the cost. The system doesn't always work on its own. Sometimes it needs a push, and I'm not sorry I was the one to give it.